All right. Thank you once again for joining me and Matt Opper here on a moment of analysis of Cincinnati Bearcat podcast. And we are back through a long, long summer of job changes and life and things. and here we are.
Accurate.
Here we are. Come back at you guys. Close to the season. It is sometime in mid-August. I'm at a computer. I should be able to see the date, but my glasses are fogged, so unable to wear those. How are you doing today, Matt?
Good. I'm doing very well.
That's good.
It's the excitement starting to ramp in. It's not like last year where from about mid-June I was just ready, but still excited for the season because it's UC football. It's kind of my thing, and
Right.
can't wait to see what this season holds.
No, absolutely. I think some of us, I don't know, me, I've kind of got still a little bit of hangover from last year. So for me, it's kind of rolling in like I'm excited about football, but last year was a lot. But I'm very excited about to see what we have coming in, right? It's almost like it's not a brand new team, but it's many different pieces happening. And we get to experience it firsthand to see how, Luke is developing the talent and getting everybody ready to live a life after Desmond and Alex Pierce and, Curtis Brooks, so we're about to see how this whole thing goes.
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely a transition year just because, like that core group has been there for a very long time. I mean, there were guys on that team last year. Marcus Brown was recruited by Tommy Tuberville.
Right.
He started in 2017. That was his first year. So yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of experience that is off the team. That doesn't mean that this team is bereft of experience. That's far from the case. There's a lot of key guys who have played a lot of football. They're just now stepping into a starting role versus being a reserve for a couple of years. I mean, Jabari Taylor is kind of a perfect example of that. A guy who's really been around for a very long time, paid his dues, and is, I think he's going to have a really big year. Personally, just because I think that, like this defensive line is going to create problems, and all the buzz out of camp is that, there really hasn't been a drop off with this defense. And you wouldn't expect that. I mean, Luke Fickell is a defensive coach. Mike Trussell is, he's a guy who's played on and coached, a lot of really, really good defenses over his career. So like there should be no expectation of that dropping off. And I don't see any indication out of camp that is what's happened.
No, I definitely agree. Now, the offense on the other hand, I don't see much of a drop off there either. Now we do have Gadugli as the offensive coordinator. The prolific Cincinnati quarterback back in the early 2000s. He last year we learned after the season that he's the one calling the plays last year. And I will honestly say you can kind of it was almost felt like Denbrock, if you thought he was calling the plays, right, didn't really evolve throughout the years, right? So it felt like, what is Denbrock like? Okay, like it's been 4 years. Denbrock isn't really, growing really. Then you come to find out that Gadugli, the first year coach, is calling the plays. You're like, oh, okay, all right. That kind of makes sense. I get it now, right? Because calling plays is different than mapping plays, right?
For sure. And like there is definitely it's unfair to say that Mike Denbrock never really evolved. If you go back and look at a game from 2018 or 2019 and watch how UC approached offensive football in general, and then go back and watch something from 2020 or last year, there was a very, very big evolution from the staff just in terms of how they attack defenses. And I think the biggest piece of that was, back in 2018, they settled up Michael Warren and rode him to glory because that's all they had. They didn't really have the weapons on the outside that could really stretch a defense and kind of present challenges. That is not the case anymore. Like there was been a lot of hand wringing within the fan base the last couple of years, not years, but the last couple of months, about how the possibility is that this offense is going to go back to that 2018 nadir. And it's like, you just got to look at look at who was on the field then, and then look at the guys who are going to be on the field now. They have so many more weapons that whoever wins the starting back job, and we'll talk about that at length. Whoever wins the job has plenty of weapons at their disposal and is not Like I don't think you're going to see a falling back to the pack to that degree. Is it going to be a top 15 offense again? I mean, I love it. That's a high bar to clear, though.
No, I completely agree, and I also don't think it. So the first play of last year was I want to say, was a post corner to Scott, and it was a deep, very deep post corner to Scott. Like it was drawn up. Like our first play, we're gonna go at him. Denbrock never really did that. And that was something I was kind of confused about. Like, wait, okay, Denbrock is different now. Like when I seen that first play, my mind was Denbrock is different. What's going on? So I figured, so for me, when I say he didn't evolve, that's what a lot of people thinking was because there was a lot of laws on offense last year. Let's be honest, right? There was a lot of, like why would they call that play there? That was kind of weird type things happening. And so that would make you then when they, like I said, when they said Gadugli was making the calls, it's like, okay, a first year offensive coordinator calling the calls, that makes more sense. But just from that one play from the Gadugli and other plays that he called right throughout the year, you can tell that he's never going to go back to 2018. Like I believe that Gadugli is the kind of dude who will tell Fick, like, look, I understand what you're trying to do, and I'm with you. I promise I'm with you. But I think we can make things a little bit more exciting. Like I think we have the tools to make it a little bit more exciting. Now, I trust the quarterbacks I have, and we're gonna do a lot of runs. I know you love your runs. I know you love your inside zones. And look, we got all type of inside zones. It's pretty, ain't it? But look, let's spread it out a little bit and see what we got. We got 4-2-9 guys running out there. We got a 6'6" receiver. Two of them really. We'll see what we can do. So. I think he would really push the envelope in that way and kind of convince Fick, or has convinced Fick. Let's try things a little bit different, just a little bit.
Yeah. And like, I think one of the biggest things that I'm going to be looking for as I'm watching the offense this year is it's more of it's not a schematically, it's not going to be that different. The personnel groupings aren't going to be that different. What I'm looking for is, will UC hunt matchups in a way that smart offenses do, right?
Yeah.
Because that is not something that UC has really done. If they were really hunting matchups, Alec Pierce would have had 1,400 yards last year. Like he would have set the record. He would have set the school record, but they didn't really do that. They did that in specific games where they thought that they had an advantage, but that advantage existed in every game against every secondary that UC played, but they didn't really try to hunt those mismatches enough for my liking. I really think that the way that the easiest way to differentiate between a good offensive play caller and a great offensive play caller is that a great offensive play caller, if he has something that you can't figure out, he is not going to go away from that at all. Kind of a perfect example of that for me is what Alabama did with Devontae Smith. It's like, oh, you don't have anything. Yeah. You got nobody who can do anything with Devontae Smith. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do orbit motion 10 times a game and get him the ball on the flats against the linebacker. Just to get him the ball in space.
No,
like absolutely. UC has that kind of, I'm not saying that anybody on this team is Devontae Smith. I'm just saying that they have a relative mismatch in this conference with guys like Tyler Scott and Trey Tucker and Josh Wiley that I don't think they really took advantage of that enough in the last couple of years. That's the thing that I'm really looking forward to. And I think that Gino is going to do a much better job of that than Denbrock did.
No, I completely agree. And I will say last year, I think there was still a whole lot of influence of Denbrock on that team, even though, he still had, he still had some command where, planning, and all that and mapping plays and all that. There was a lot of his influence in that still. But I will say, like, for instance, let's talk about the Notre Dame game real quick last year. Nobody on Notre Dame could guard Alec Pierce. There was nobody on Notre Dame who could run with, my brain.
Trey Tucker.
Yeah, Trey Tucker. There's nobody on Alabama who could run with Trey Tucker. Period. Like those two people, and it seemed like nobody could keep up with Michael Young either. Like it was one of those things where our wide receiver core to me was better than their a DB, their backfields, and. They had that all-star safety. I can never remember his name, but they had him. I get it. But even, he was even having a hard time. And so it was one of those things where they exploited it, yes. And they start going to, what was it, 4 straights or
or verticals.
Yeah, 4 verticals, and they could not do anything on a 4 vert route versus our team, our tight ends. They couldn't do nothing with our tight ends. They couldn't do nothing with the receivers on 4 verts. They ran it like 3 times in the game. Like, nobody run 4 verts 3 times in the game. Like, that's just not something, even though they probably should.
It's there is some debate, for me, 4 verts is like undefeated because there's just so much that you can do off of it. It's my favorite passing concept. Right. Other people say 9-8-9, which is 2 streaks and a post.
Yeah.
Also,
I love that.
A classic.
Yeah.
But yeah, like but those are the kind of routes that you a foundation of your offense if you believe in your personnel enough. And I just don't feel like they really ever got to the point where they believed in their personnel and what they had recruited and what they had developed,
right?
Where they could just be like, our better is better than your better,
right?
It doesn't matter what we're calling. We're just going to get the ball to this guy or to get the ball to that guy. I just don't think they did enough of that last year. Like Josh Wiley had 39 targets.
Right.
Is there anybody in the AAC that could cover him that's not on UC's team?
No.
Not really. Like it's stuff like that. And part of the low target is they play at a very slow and deliberate pace. Yeah. And that's not really going to change because the faster you go, the more disadvantage you put on your defense. And we all know Fickle is never going to disadvantage the defense in any way. No. But you can still be selective with your pace and, off big chunk plays and big splash plays, you can still go fast because that's when you get that big 15, 20-yard gain, even if it's not a touchdown, the defense is reeling. You got to be able to put the hammer down. And I don't think that's another thing that I'm looking for that I think we'll see more of with this group versus last year's.
No, absolutely. I'm just excited. I'm excited because I agree. I think 4 verts is something that definitely should be utilized a little bit more. And you said, like, they didn't believe in their talent. And it's one of those things where it felt like in Notre Dame, it was like, hey, we got to win this game by any means necessary. So throw it out there. Because they never really did it again, right? It was one of those things where it's like, hey, figure it out. Do it. I don't care. Just,
And then part of that is just the Fickle, I want to win by enough. Right. Like he's not a guy who's ever really going to go out there and try to run up the score, even though there were games in conference last year where if UC really put the pedal down the entire game in conference, like they should have hit 50s in almost all those games. And they just kind of they got 31 against they got like 31 against Tulane and they played half a game. They completely sleptwalked through the first half of that game.
Sometimes that's where being a nice guy just, he's the meanest nice guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm really looking forward to this offense this year. And like, I really think the biggest difference is going to be in the run game and the design of it.
Oh, yeah.
Bringing in Mike Cummings versus having, Crook is out Crook.
Yeah, Crook is out. I'm very excited about Cummings. Yes, I agree.
It's going to be a really different thing. I mean, like your foundation is still your foundation. They still are going to run a ton of inside zone, but like all those little trick and gadget plays that UC had in the running game, they were like 5 to 10% of the offense in terms of how often they were used. If you go and look at what Central Michigan did when Mike Cummings was a run game coordinator, they still were primarily an inside zone team, but they had a whole lot of different series that they used that were power based out of gun. Like their gun power game was really, really good and really like just fundamentally sound.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up with the leading rusher in the country being from Central Michigan. You have a really good offensive line with a good scheme. I'm really anticipating kind of what that is going to look like here because you don't have Jerome Ford anymore, but that running back room still has plenty of talent. Whoever wins the job, whoever ends up being the number one guy, or if it ends up being a group, you can have Corey Kiner, you can have Miles Montgomery, you can have Ryan Montgomery. Like there's a lot of guys in there who can carry the load. I just think that they're going to have a much more creative run game to kind of utilize and create space versus, running the same inside zone, 90% of your snaps.
Yeah, I watched some Central Michigan, and I realized one thing I noticed about them is their schemes seem simplified to me. Like I was looking at them, it was a lot of pulling and like double team passing off, right? Like going to second level type things happening. Um, there wasn't a whole lot of, the technique was sound because it was simple, right? It was easy to grasp, easy to understand, and the linemen understood it and ran with it. You could see it. You could see the confidence in the way that they blocked. It takes away the thinking aspect of the game as well, right? When you simplify it for your lines, and I'm excited to see that because that might help Mets, who we are all pulling for the most part, but they said they got a dude named Huber, who is out there balling, so we'll see what he can do as well. But someone who struggled understanding right and left tackle, and somebody like Mets, we can see how that benefits him as well as the rest of the offensive line, right?
Yeah. And like it's going to be a very good offensive line for sure. Like it's the best in the conference for my money. And I think it's a pretty sizable gap between them and UCF, who is probably the second best. Now that Tulsa graduated their stud left tackle, I don't think they're going to be quite as formidable up front as they have been in the last couple of years. So yeah, like I think they're still going to have a pretty big advantage, and that's really where the difference between UC and the rest of the conference has really showed up at the line of scrimmage. They have been flat out dominant.
Yes.
At the line of scrimmage, at the point of attack on both sides of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really think that's going to change much this year, regardless of who the offensive line coach, regardless of who's coaching the defensive line, because there was also a change there with Walt Stewart coming back. But there's still so much talent on those two lines relative to the rest of the conference that they're going to have a lot of, like, a pretty sizable margin for error with their play up front.
No, absolutely. And we talking about the defensive line with Walt Stewart. We did bring in UC fan favorite Walt Stewart. And when he was at Temple's D line was really, really good. And that made me excited. I was sad that help me out here, defensive line coach that went to Jets.
Yeah, I'm not in midseason form.
Me neither.
We'll played at Louisville.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Greg
Scruggs. Boom.
Greg Scruggs.
There we go. Look, teamwork. But when Greg
work.
Absolutely. When he left and we said, hey, we had Walt Stewart, and they just sent him down to the D line. I was like, because I remember those Temple teams in that D line. They were nasty and they were hard, and they made life difficult for Cincinnati every year that Walt was there. And so I'm looking forward to that and seeing what his spin can, do to help the D line, because our D line is big. And you was talking about Taylor, Jabari. He's fast. He's big, athletic, and fast. And a lot of people sleep on him as far as athleticism goes. But when I seen him running down, was it Houston? Was that the game?
Yeah, he was putting in a good effort.
Yes.
For a 270-pound man trying to run down Tank Dell, which is a very difficult task.
Exactly, but not that far behind him.
Yeah, I mean, he kept up pretty well. Like, he moves very well.
Yeah.
I mean, between him, Juwan Briggs, and Van back for year 75 or whatever it is, they have a very good front line.
Yes.
In terms of starters. The real question is, like, who are the guys behind him? Like, Eric Phillips is probably your next man up at defensive end. The Godfather, Deontay Corleone, is probably the number one backup to Briggs, and that's a completely different, that's a completely different body type than what UCU generally has had at that position. So that's going to be a shocking adjustment for a lot of centers in this league.
Yes.
Going from Briggs, who is very, very quick and powerful, to Deontay, who's just by sheer volume requires two people.
Yes. And, don't get to Briggs is still 320 pounds. And, Deontay Corleone is about 330, but they're not that different as far as sizes, but the way their bodies are built is very different. Their mass probably feels different. Like, one is just mass and one is strength. Like, and it requires extreme, to deal with either one of them. I would not want to be an offensive lineman having to go against either one. And then behind them, though, you look at it because we all know Van, uber athletic, strong, and just have a plethora of technique that he utilizes to get around. Like that's who he's going to be. But behind them, linebackers. People keep saying that this is the cream of the crop as linebackers for UC. And I mean, the athleticism, the speed, the size. You have many different sizes, but different, they each have different specialized and different ways of attacking a defense. And I'm interested in seeing how they utilize each,
Yeah,
linebacker.
it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of approach the defensive scheme. By all indications, they are going to continue to run more or less what they have been running, which is
right.
Everyone calls it a 3-3-5. It's not. It's
Not
more
really.
like a 3-2-6.
Right.
Because that overhang defender is technically a linebacker, but he really plays as a safety. And by overhang, like if you think about the defense in terms of how it's structured, the overhang player is not the deepest safety. It's the safety who's kind of the next layer down.
Right.
And it's just such a weird defense if you are used to conventional, 4-3 or even a 4-2-5, because by taking that one of those defensive linemen and lifting him up and making him a linebacker, you just give yourself an additional person who has safety safety pass game considerations first, but they can also add into the run fit. And that's why they have been so good, because there's no magic bullet to kind of getting around this defense. There's really no trick to it. They are just going to kind of go, hit you in the mouth. And if they execute and tackle, they're just going to be really hard to beat for anybody.
Yeah, no, this defense gave Alabama fits. Now think about and you have to consider that, right? This defense really did. And it's, and Tressel, you got to take your hat off for him, because he walked into a scheme he really wasn't familiar with and kind of looked at it for a second. He's like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And he did it, right? Like people really don't discredit, but really don't recognize the type of brilliance you have to be able to take on a defensive scheme your first year, even with the type of players he had, and be like, yeah, I can call that defense. That's fine. Right. And do it.
Yeah. I mean, he had to learn the defense like any new player has to learn the defense.
Right.
Except even more so because you have to call it. You have to have such a fundamental understanding of how it is structured. And it's an odd structure. Yes. No one else is really doing this.
Absolutely.
Just because it requires like such specific type of people. Like Joel Blanco was a linebacker, but he had the responsibilities of a defensive tackle on most plays, especially early downs.
Mm-hmm.
He was basically your 3 technique, and he would twist and pick with the nose, and it created all sorts of havoc with centers across anybody who really played him. They couldn't really figure it out, just because it's so disorienting for an offensive line to have guys show up in the spots where they're never really there. Because if you've played a lot of football, if you're playing at Division I level, if you're a starter at a Division I level, you have played a lot of football. There's this muscle memory that kind of kicks in where you can, based on pre-snap stuff, based on where guys are standing, you can more or less predict where player X is going to be.
Yeah.
Player Y is going to be. But so that's like kind of ingrained, and you predict where they're going to be based on that. And then you come up against this defense that you've never seen anybody run anything quite like it before, because chances are like the front that UC plays has its roots in Canadian football. And not a lot of guys from Canada play high level Division I football. So they're not used to seeing that sort of thing. And, it has been such a delight to watch this defense just constantly befuddle offensive lines, because they cannot quite get their head around where guys are. They just can't identify, like the first thing the center does on every single play is identify the strength of the defense.
Right. No, yeah.
The strength of the defense changes based on what, happens post snap.
Yeah.
It's just really hard for people to figure out.
No, it absolutely is. Imagine having a linebacker blitzing, 75% of a game, right? And your job, you start to recognize that as nose tackle, so y'all start to adjust. The quarterback notices it, so he adjusts. And then it's that one place where it's a pass play. You expect the lineman, he's probably going to blitz. And then he doesn't. He acts like he is, and then he backs out. And now he's either spying or he has, or he's zoning in the middle of the field. And now you're confused as a quarterback because he's been blitzing the whole time. And this is what the defense does to you. It throws you off your game. They get you used to something and they switch it up on you. You have, Cook, the safety from last year, who essentially was a linebacker. Let's just be honest about it. So we had a linebacker that was a safety and a safety that was a linebacker. And in the middle linebacker that was a tackle. and they just throw people around and kind of be like, hey, figure it out. We're on. Then they put them back at linebacker. You know what I mean? Then they'll put them back at safety, and it's like, okay, we don't know what they're doing, so just play football out there, y'all. Best of luck.
They are just. I don't think they get enough credit for the innovation that they have kind of brought to the game, because everyone. I really anticipate this year that a lot of people have gone to work on their 3-down, 2 linebacker packages. And you're going to start seeing a whole lot more of these looks throughout the country. They're already there. Like, everybody's got kind of a variation on this. Georgia has one that they really killed Clemson with, mostly because they're Georgia and they just have absolute freaks everywhere. And like, there was after the national championship, Kirby Smart went and did a coach's clinic. And this coach's clinic, he basically says, well, what Quay Walker did there is not how that person should play that. That's not really his responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But he's an absolute freak show. So he just did it and it worked.
Right.
And he's just like constantly repeating this phrase with a different person every single time. UC doesn't have that level of athlete,
right?
But they are still able to confuse absolute professionals who have been doing this their entire lives, and they just cannot figure out how to get their kids to figure out what is happening because they can't even see it.
And I don't think they can replicate it, because teams have been trying to replicate what UC do. Memphis tried to replicate it. Tulsa came probably the closest to replicating, which gave
with Dave and Collins,
and have given Cincinnati a little bit of fits with their their ability to replicate. But nobody else really has had that. Even to a lesser degree, Houston, right? Houston usually do a little bit more 4 than 3, but at times they'll rotate into a 3. And try to do something similar, and it's not the same thing, obviously, because you have to have the players with the discipline to play this. It's a discipline defense. Like, I know they say, hey, go out there and play football, and you play football the way, but it's within a framework, right? So this is the discipline you need to have to do these positions. Now go ahead and play football. Play football within this framework.
Yeah, and there's spots where, like, the dollar position is a perfect example of
right,
like that. That has been Deshaun Pace the last couple of years. Van Fossen has been very good in that spot previously. And before that, it was Jarrell White. And that really is that's the football guy spot.
Yes.
Like, hey, see ball, get ball.
Exactly.
Like, you don't really have any responsibilities other than that. You are a +1 to both the pass defense and the run defense.
Right.
You just need to figure out where the ball is and go get it.
If the quarterback drops back, you drop back. If the quarterback hands the ball off, you run and get the ball. Good job. All right, y'all. Great. Like,
and like, they're just unleashing these absolute hellions, and they're just like, Deshaun Pace is one of my favorite UC football players to watch.
Yes.
He reminds me of, like, he is way more, I don't want to be blasphemous, but he's way more athletic than Haruki Nakamura. I know, not a huge statement, but Haruki would like try to kill people. Haruki like brought judo to football.
He did.
Like his
Haruki
dad was the
was
national
smaller. Let's say
judo
that.
coach,
Right.
and he played football like he had played judo his entire life. He's like, oh, I know how leverage works. Let's go.
Yes. And but the thing about like Deshaun literally calls himself Joker. Like that, and anybody watch Batman understand who Joker is. That tell you the mindset that he's walking into the football game with. Complete mayhem. That's all his whole goal in the football game is to create mayhem. Yeah. And they said his brother Ivan is similar, except bowling ball, probably stronger, and he's really good at finding the football. Like really, really good. So you have one causing mayhem. Both two people causing mayhem from the same family with the same background, probably raised very similarly, doing on the same team, just causing problems.
Yeah, so these linebackers are going to be something else. You got the Pace brothers, you got Will Huber,
right,
who is an absolute menace on third downs.
Yes.
He's going to be playing every snap now. So that's, that's kind of that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. He's going to be the captain of the defense. You got Jaheim Thomas, finally ready to explode. Yes. Like he got a chance to play when Beavers got hurt against Central Florida, and he played pretty well.
He did.
He just was behind Darian Beavers.
Yeah, man. And you can tell when he played at UCF, he was a step slow only because he was thinking. You can kind of tell the way he was moving. He was thinking too much. And when he figured it out, he ran full speed wherever he was trying to go. But, you can tell, like, okay, this is new for him.
Yeah. I mean, these linebackers are the best in the conference by far.
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to be a really interesting thing how they juggle the minutes and juggle the snaps and try to get all these people on the field at the same time. Jaheim is, I've heard, in camp, we're talking about him kind of playing as that rush end to give him a kind of a speed rush element that they don't really have with a defensive line.
Yeah.
And that'll be interesting to see because I think he can do it. He has the physical capabilities to do it. But some of these, like, that's really the only thing that is missing to my mind when I look at this defense is they don't really have that A1 pass rush menace like they've had for the last couple of years in Myjai Sanders. And Myjai only had 5.5 sacks last year. And if you look at the counting stats, you'll say he didn't really have much of an impact last year. Regardless, he was still first team all conference because the coaches know the havoc that he created and the panic that he caused to offensive tackles.
They were terrified. They're offsides because they were scared of him trying to get by. They was trying to get their foot back enough fast enough to catch him. The holding calls he could, like, they didn't even call all the holding calls on him by far. Like, I remember watching game like that's a hold and that's a hold and that's a hold. If the refs called every hold on Myjai, there would have been no game happening. It would have been just penalty after penalty. Like, it was one of those things where it's like, that boy, he's terrifying. And and so we got Jaheim. Hopefully we can get the same type of, he may not have the same impact as a Myjai, but maybe we can get some.
But that's asking a lot for a guy who's playing his first play and who hasn't really played defensive end. And that's, to me, that is the thing that is missing. Because
all right, so we were talking about the defense and Jaheim Thomas impact on defense, potential impact on defense, and if he could create some semblance of pass rush, he said that's a lot for him to have to deal with or have to do. So we'll see what he's gonna bring for us.
Yeah, he's capable of it athletically. It's just a matter of whether or not it comes to production and when it starts to happen. And the more interesting part for the defensive line in terms of looking forward to this year is kind of what happens with the rest of the guys in that 3 through 8 range, because they're going to play a ton of bodies because they always do. We know that Corleone is probably going to be the primary backup of the nose.
Yeah.
But at the defensive end spots is where it's going to get really interesting because you got Noah Potter coming in, transferring from Ohio State. Highly regarded recruit, never really did a ton with Ohio State, just didn't get the field that often. And then you got the most interesting person to me is Rob Jackson.
Rob Jackson, can he put it together?
Can he put it together? I mean, it's a matter of when he puts it together because the physical is off the charts with this guy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's 6'6", 280 and skinny. And he has like a 7'7" wingspan or something stupid. Like he has all the things that you want in a modern defensive end: the long arms, the quick get off, the bend, all that. But can he put it together?
Right.
If he does, like that's one of those things that where I think it's going to be a pretty good year regardless. I think double-digit wins is a reasonable expectation. I think, competing for the conference title again is a reasonable expectation. Whether or not they actually win it again is to be determined, but I think that's kind of in the strata they're going to be playing with. They're going to be right there with UCF and Houston. I don't think anybody else from the league can really touch those three teams just because the overall talent level of those three is just a notch above everybody else.
Here's the issue that I have with UCF. Who is the quarterback going to be? And that's my issue where, people like UCF brought in all these transfers. That's nice. A lot of teams bring in transfers. SMU brought in amazing transfers last year. Will they mold into because let's be honest, UC transfers usually take a year for them to finally get informed at the school. What makes their transfers any different? And everybody like, oh, UCF got these amazing transfers. That's nice. But what are we expecting from them in the summer? It's a summer. We're going through a summer with these guys. We expect them to have such big, impact. Like, come on, y'all. Like, I'm cool. Like, UCF's gonna be good, but let's kind of see what these transfers they bring in do before especially at quarterback. You know,
and John Reese Plumlee was named today the starting quarterback for them.
He's really fast.
Like he is extremely athletic, and like
right.
Gus requires a running threat at quarterback for his offense to be remotely effective. Like it's the number one thing that he has to check. The offensive line can suck, the running backs can suck, the wide receivers can be okay, whatever. If he does not have an above average running threat at quarterback, that offense is dead in the water.
Right.
So he will bring that to the table. But he is so unproven as a passer. That is not really his game. And whether or not he can gel with kind of, because UCF still has a lot of guys on that roster who were designed, who were called to play in an offense that is basically a cheat code.
Yeah.
Where all you do is run nines.
Yeah.
You run nines and stops. That's all you do.
Absolutely. Like, I don't, and I'm, this, like I said, it's going to be UCF, Houston, and those, like you said, two biggest things for Houston. Dana is always the thing you got to think about there. Like, is he going to finally make his team tough enough? Is the team going to finally be tough enough?
Schedule is so light that I don't think we're going to know for a very long time because they don't have UCF and they don't have Cincinnati.
Because once Cincinnati hit Houston in the mouth in the championship game last year, it was over. Once Cincinnati hit Houston in the mouth, they folded last year. So the question is, can they finally step up and be like, okay, we're not going to, if we get hit in the mouth, that's fine.
And like what I keep coming back to when I look at UC relative to the rest of the conference is, and until further notice, this will continue to be the case. Can you block them? Can you block UC?
Yes.
Because no one's been able to do it for years. And until someone does effectively, like the closest anyone has come to doing it is Tulsa. Tulsa has come closer than anyone else. But everybody else in this conference has just been absolutely dominated up front by UC on both lines of scrimmage. It's not just about their offense versus our defense. It's both sides. Tulsa is the only team that has come close to parity at the line of scrimmage. And there's a reason why they have given UC the toughest games out of anybody.
Yeah. Tulsa is the team that's like, we want to hit somebody in the mouth. The teams that want to hit somebody in the mouth, like for instance, SMU they were the most, what's the word I'm looking for? SMU was
soft.
a team. Yeah, they were soft. Soft. But, they was all about, being pretty and scoring points.
They were a finesse team.
Finesse, thank you. They're the ultimate finesse team. Throw the ball in the air. We got fast. Cincinnati said, that's nice. Hit you in the mouth. As soon as they got hit in the mouth, they just fell. They folded like tiles. Like it was insane. And so we're looking like, who in the conference Because that's right now, since they're excited to hit somebody. They're excited. They want to hit. Who else in the conference wants to hit? Who's excited to hit somebody? Because you're not going to beat Cincinnati playing finesse. That won't work.
Well, and then the other thing I keep coming back to, looking forward to this year, is we had objectively not very talented offensive lines.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking like 2018.
Yeah.
That first 10-win team, that breakthrough season, that offensive line, if you look back, it is the island of misfit toys.
Oh, man,
you had Morgan James, you had Chris Ferguson, who had been the defensive tackle for 3 years, switching over to play right tackle. Not a transition that anybody makes.
No.
Like, there's just it was such a hodgepodge of guys, and they were still really effective in the running game.
Yeah.
And now they actually have a lot of talent.
Yes.
And I don't see any reason why the outcome is going to be any different.
I don't.
And that could be very presumptuous, and that could be a lot of arrogance based on the fact that Luke Fickell is 44-6 in his last 4 years. That seems to be pretty good. Like, I'm okay with like 44-6. That seems like a good record. And until proven otherwise, like, I don't see any indication whatsoever that the basic building blocks and ingredients have changed that much. And those building blocks are of higher quality now than they were the last time you see reset everything in terms of personnel and, quarterbacks and all that. That was the last time it happened. And the raw ingredients are much, much better this time.
Started off with foam blocks. They were strong foam blocks. They were good foam blocks, but they were foam. And you say, hey, I want wood. Let's go get some wood blocks. Now you have wood blocks. It's going to be a stronger home. Like, it's that simple. And I'm with you. Like, I don't see it, not because I believe UC is the best team ever. Like, no, I believe it because their philosophy is a philosophy that has worked. And until somebody matches their aggression, they won't beat them. Not in this conference. Not in this conference, they won't. And like, ECU tries. They do. ECU want that so bad. Oh, and their spirit in their hearts, they want to be able to match the aggression, but they just have not been able to. Because the truth of the matter is, UC ingredients are better than ECU's, no matter how hard, they try to match what UC does. UC's ingredients are better. And when you try to play somebody in their own game, you have to either match them with it or be better than them. For instance, I bring up the Alabama game. We can bring up the Georgia game. UC was able to match Georgia and Alabama. The difference between Alabama and UC was Alabama O-line said, hey, we're going to lay on them. And then the D-line said, hey, we're not going to let Des Ridder throw the football. We're going to knock it down every time. And that's what they did. They just knocked the ball out the air. And because Ford, he averaged 5.5 yards. That's good. That's a really good against Alabama team. 5.5 yards a carry. G5 team? What? But it's so this team can match the upper echelons teams. But like you said, did we have the ingredients to really play them? No, we didn't have the ingredients. Maybe Georgia, we got really close with Georgia. We got really close. But Alabama, no, we didn't have the ingredients to beat Alabama head on. Not at the time.
Yeah, and like Alabama, they know exactly what their strength is. Yeah. You have to beat Alabama playing grown man ball. And by grown man ball, what I mean is we're going to single up our corners on your receivers every single play. They're going to be in man-on-man coverage every time. And you have to win one-on-one balls.
You want to hear the crazy thing, though?
Do a good job of that.
Alec Pierce was killing Alabama DBs.
Yeah. Then they started rolling coverage to him, and they made Des go anywhere else.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Des couldn't get the ball out of his hands, not because the coverage was necessarily good, but like I would say, there was, 6 balls knocked down in that game? All those balls that were knocked down was going to an open man. They were going to an open man. But the defense seen some type of tick or something in Des where they knew, hey, he does this, he's throwing the ball. Get ready to jump. And they got really good at that. But the thing I would say about UC and outside of the Alabama game is that I'm excited for is I want to see what the quarterback going to do. I want to see how the quarterback evolves, because the one thing I would say about Dez, as much as I love him, his accuracy suffered at times as far as deep balls, because he had a timing issue, I believe, with his deep balls. He's usually late, and that caused them to be underthrown because you're throwing dudes who run 4.29s and 4.3s. Like, and you have to be able to get the ball at a certain amount of time to not underthrow them.
Yeah, and like, I mean, like I'm gonna congratulate us on going 45 minutes or however long it's been and not talking about the quarterbacks, because every other podcast that talks about UC is just 100% quarterback.
Right.
I look at this two different ways. Whoever wins, they're gonna be fine. I really think
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And if they're not, the other person will probably be fine.
Yeah.
You know, like if Ben wins and he plays like shit against Arkansas and he plays like shit against Kennesaw State, and then Evan comes in against Miami and just lights the house on fire, that's fine. If it's the inverse of that, that's fine. I think you're going to get good quarterback play just because you have this is not, like I said, this is not 2018 young Des Ridder going on the field against Alabama or going against the field against UCLA and not having anybody other than Josiah DeGuara that he trusts.
Right.
The receivers are so much better. The tight ends are better. You are unproven at running back, but you have such a good offensive line that probably will not matter in the end.
Real quick, not only Josiah DeGuara, but then people double teaming Khalil Lewis. But continue.
Like he had two options.
Right.
Like there's this receiver group is like 6 or 7 deep, and that's not even talking about the 3 tight ends who are all potential NFL players.
Right.
And I know Shaman hasn't done a thing, but Shaman Mateer is coming, man. He is going to be a very, very good tight end.
Yeah.
Like he's running sprints 21 miles an hour at 6'5", 260 pounds.
That's insane, man. I
normal.
Can't.
So he'll be fine. But like whoever wins the job is ultimately going to be fine. I think it'll probably end up being Ben Bryant.
Oh yeah.
And that's fine. And he's going to do a really good impression of Brendan Kay circa 2013.
I think he is too.
Nobody remembers Brendan Kay, but he had the best season statistically of any UC quarterback, because I do not really count the Zach Collaros 2009 season where he got a quarterback rating of 190 because he played 4 games, right?
And he was completely different than the quarterback he came in for that everybody was preparing for.
And like a lot of that came from that UConn game, which I was there for. It was amazing. Our defense could not stop a fucking breeze. But like Brendan Kay was really, really good in 2013.
Brendan Kay was a really good quarterback.
Like, he had one really, really good year. And if we get that out of Ben Bryant, we'll be fine. We'll win 10, 11 games. We'll compete for the conference title. We might not win it. We could win it. Who knows? But like they'll be fine at quarterback regardless of who it is. And if it's Evan Prater and they have to kind of build for the future, he offers so much variability and versatility in the running game that whatever he lacks as a passer right now is going to be more than made up for it in the end. Just because Dez was a plus run game quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Evan Prater is a plus in the running game. Like he can do things in short area with his quickness that Dez could not do. Like Dez could not make something out of nothing. Dez needed runway. There's a reason why that arc block from the tight end became such a foundation of that offense with Dez, because Dez needed someone to run interference so he could get up to speed. He could not get up to speed like this. Evan Prater has no problem getting up to speed. So like, regardless of who it is, and it's probably going to be Ben Bryant, they will be perfectly fine at quarterback.
Yeah.
Like that's not a concern for me at all, just because they have the pieces around them to allow them to thrive, whatever the offense looks like based on who the quarterback is.
And Ben Bryant is an adequate athlete at that. You know, he's not, he's not stone in the pocket. He can escape. He can move. You know, he can get you 10 yards, you know, down the field from a broken down, a collapsed pocket. Like, and so I'm not worried about Ben Bryant and like, oh, if we have Ben Bryant back there, then what we're gonna do if the pocket isn't, then he's gonna move, he's gonna run. Like he's not,
Yeah.
you know, he's an athlete. Ben Bryant is an athlete. He's not Evan Prater, but he's an athlete, you know. And he can, you know, and you know, you say Brendan K especially was that deep ball. It was if you get Brendan K, get you that 40-yard bomb. I'm excited to see that from if Ben Bryant. I'm excited to see how these wide receivers do with the quarterback who can get them.
Well, that's like Dez had some great throws last year. He also had some that he left badly underthrown.
Yes.
Like
yes.
the one to Pierce in the third quarter against Houston comes to mind immediately.
Yeah.
Pierce almost hurt himself on that play because it was overthrown so badly.
You could I always feel like I as a, you know, I know you play football, I play football maybe to not that level, but when you see something like that or when you experience something like that as a player where your other player kind of puts you in a bad position, you're like, oh man, come on. Like and
that's a walk. That should have been a walk-in touchdown.
But Pierce should have had so many walk-in touchdowns. He should have so many.
But they didn't. And like that is Dez was a great player. We're talking about like the one or two warts to his game. The fact that he is not instantly fast. Right. The fact that he, like most normal human beings, requires a little bit of ground to gain speed.
Yeah. And he's a tad bit late on his deep throws.
Yeah, it was just either late in recognition or late getting the ball out, whatever it was. But yeah, like that's not going to be an issue that Ben Bryant has. He'll have other issues.
Oh yeah.
You know, no quarterback is perfect.
No. Ben Bryant has a problem with having too much confidence in his arm. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like you like those guys, but at the same time, like you get the Brett Favre
ball in harm's way all the time.
Exactly.
Pick your spots.
You know, don't throw into triple coverage. I get it, but don't do that. You know, and you know, we're probably gonna have those words with Ben Bryant, right? Where you like, why did he throw into triple? What? Like, what is going on? Like, okay, I know he thought he can get into that pocket, but 4 dudes was enclosing on this guy, and one of them jumped the ball. Like, we don't have those issues with Ben Bryant.
Yeah.
But we're also going to have plays where Ben Bryant throws the ball 50 yards down the field to a streaking Trey Tucker, and he just walks in to the touchdown. Everybody going to be excited. Like, we wish we had that already. Why could we have that before? And then we were like, that's why we should have started Ben Bryant back in 2019. You don't have all that happening. So
yeah, can't wait for that discourse. Can't wait. It's going to be really fun. It's going to make Twitter an absolute joy on Saturday afternoons.
Absolutely. But then you got Evan Prater, like you said, who I am excited about because of his stop and go speed, his cutbacks, his ability to go from 0 to 100 is out. Like it has not, you haven't seen this in a quarterback maybe since I haven't seen it. What? Who would you say?
At UC, nobody.
Yeah, but Baylor quarterback, Robert Griffin III. Yeah, maybe he's the last quarterback you really see that can just stop and go, like off his height of top of a dime.
Yeah,
can be dynamic like that. And so you have a quarterback like that where you're like, okay, I get that we have an arm out this world and this guy, but this guy, that's why I think they're having a hard time naming somebody. Yeah. Because you have this once in a lifetime talent in Evan Prater, who's an exceptional athlete who actually has the arm to be a really good quarterback. Like his first instinct coming up was to run. So he's, so passing and not wanting to bail is something he's fighting against. But he actually has a really, really good arm.
Yeah.
And so
and like that's the thing. It's a matter of, do you want to, in terms of overall talent, like Evan is the most talented quarterback to come here as a high school recruit.
Yes.
That kind of is what it is. Like he is immensely talented. He went to the Army All-American game. He was the first Bearcat to do that since Kevin Muhan, I think it was the other one.
Oh.
So he's got that kind of pedigree. And that's not to say that Ben was not well regarded coming out of the high school. He committed to Wisconsin initially, didn't work out, ends up here. So like he has a lot of talent. Like the talent level is not the issue. It's a matter of kind of what you want the offense to be and you want to go this season. And that's why, like, this is not an easy decision to make. I think that's why they make the money that they make, because these are not easy decisions to make. Like, that's a tough thing to have to do to make that decision. And which way they lean is going to be, I mean, we're going to find out. I'm sure they know. I mean,
this
it's 2
crop of
weeks.
receivers, it's going to be really hard not to go Ben Bryant with this crop of receivers.
That's the thing, because you have that kind of infrastructure around him to really take advantage of all of his skills. And not to say that those receivers cannot be effective with Evan throwing them the ball. It's just going to be a different offense.
Yeah.
You know, just because he has a different skill set than Ben Bryant does. If you have a good, competent offensive coordinator, they're going to build the scheme around the talents of the quarterback.
Yeah.
Where you get into trouble is when you don't, when you just have a system and you just run it.
And I'm sure even the coaches will tell you they're evaluating two different things between the two players. So you're asking who's going to be the number one quarterback. They're going to honestly, and they're going to confidently, and they're going to be real with you and say, I don't know, because we're evaluating two very different skill sets. And it's a hard thing to do. And so I wouldn't want to be in their shoes, honestly. Like, that's why they get millions of dollars and I don't. So
it's going to be an interesting decision to make. And, you know, I think they can beat Arkansas with either guy, just because Arkansas has some really glaring issues with the roster, which we'll get into when we preview that game.
Right.
That kind of play into what UC has and the way UC
Evan Prater,
is built.
I feel like, and I'm be honest with you, that game, in a lot of ways, I feel like Evan Prater might be, we'll get into this more, maybe a better piece as far as his talent goes against them. But I can see why they would lean towards Ben Bryant. Like I said, once again, like you said, we'll get into that when we preview that game.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be an exciting year. I'm looking forward to it.
As am I. And you know, we just wanted to come in. We wanted to real quick kind of go over what kind of happened over the summer, what we're looking at heading into the season, because we've been gone for so long. We'll come back at you, and we'll, you know, our next goal is to kind of preview the season, as far as like who we're playing. And next week we're going to break down Arkansas and see exactly who we're getting into that next week, because it'll be, we're going to have to, because
we're only 2 weeks out, man.
Yeah. So next Sunday is 28, and then we play them that Saturday. Yeah. So next Sunday is going to be us breaking down.
I mean, this coming Saturday is week 0. So there will be real live, actual college football on the television.
And we might
it will not be a good game. I think it's Nebraska somehow involved again. But I don't think it's Illinois, so they can't lose that again.
No. I mean, they'll find a way to lose whoever by one point, but you know, it's the best bad team that we have. But no, so thank you guys for listening, and we'll definitely be back here next week talking about Arkansas, breaking them down and trying to figure out how we're going to beat them. Yeah, because that's our job. All right. Have a great weekend or week, y'all.